set, secure. Automation and orchestration, endpoint detection and response, network visibility, cloud, containers, DevSecOps, threat intelligence, security platforms. Wondering how to keep up with all the latest security products and trends while still keeping your organization safe? Then stick around to listen to Ready, Set, Secure, the Set Solutions Podcast.
And hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 47 of Ready, Set, Secure, Set Solutions Podcast. As usual, I am Michael Farnum, CTO here at Set Solutions. And joining us, tied to an IP address, I think, or something like that, Greg Porterfield at home. How you doing, Greg?
I'm doing good. Still recovering from Vegas, but good to be home.
I think we all are still. And as you can see, special guest star, second time on the podcast, first time in studio, Phil Wylie. How you doing, Phil?
Good. Honored to be here. This is only my second in-person podcast recording. So.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, well, man, I feel very special then. That's cool. Well, Phil is known Phil for 4 or 5 years now, I think. Comes down to the conference that I run, and now he's works for CyCognito over there, which is a partner of Set Solutions. Why don't you give us a quick rundown of what you do over there at CyCognito and all the other 500,000 things you do?
So my background is in offensive security. Yeah. I perform pen testing, and for CyCognito, I do some internal education through the enablement part of my job, as well as evangelism, speaking at conferences, doing podcasts and webinars, writing articles.
World traveler too, huh?
Starting to do that, yeah.
Yeah, going to Singapore for
Yes.
besides Singapore.
Hack in the Box, Singapore.
Hack in the Box,
Yes.
That's right, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so you're heading down there. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for being here. Appreciate to make the trip down. I know it's, a little flight, not too bad.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to be talking about, probably tired of me talking about it, but we are going to be talking about API security, but in context of attack surface management, which is what CyCognito does. One of the things that CyCognito does. So that's what we're going to be getting into today. So a little bit of spin on it. I talk about API security all the time. People are tired of hearing it, but I think this is a unique view based on an article that you wrote, and I think you did a recording on it too. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. So let's get into the Set Solutions segment real quick, and then we're going to do something a little bit different on the news side of things. We're not going to do news, but let's get into that. So first, we've got a couple of executive wine dinners, one here in Houston this week, Wednesday, August 17th, up in Dallas next week, Thursday, August 25th. If you want to be invited to those, get with your Set Solutions account manager, and we can get you included on that. Then Wednesday, September 7th, we've got a Boots and Bourbon down here, which is a lot of fun. You get some custom boots and you get to drink bourbon. That's on September 7th. And we're going to do that up in Dallas as well, September 8th. And then we've already done our Astros game for the year. So now we're going to go up to Dallas and do a Rangers game, which is a really nice stadium up there if you haven't been. If you want to go, that's on Thursday, September 22nd. And then we've got a conference up in Austin on September 22nd to 24th, which is the Texas Cyber Summit. So Joseph's up there putting that on. He's done that a few years now, so he's going to be putting that on again. Phil's going to be speaking there. There'll be quite a few going there, so look that up. But we will have a booth, and we'll be hanging around for that event. It's a good event. So that's it for the Set Solutions segment. Now, instead of news, I surprised Greg with this about 15 minutes before. Actually, I sent it to him on Slack, but he was working, so he didn't see it. We had news articles already, but what I thought of is that instead of talking about news segments, even though there is some pretty good news, we'll use that next time. All three of us were at Black Hat. I wasn't at Defcon. I was there for Black Hat. Greg was there for Black Hat and Defcon. And Phil was there for Black Hat, Defcon, and before that, besides Las Vegas.
Correct.
So I figured between the three of us, we've got a lot of perspectives on what it looked like, what the differences are between the ones. Maybe you could talk about give a little quick snippets of what you talked about on each one of those. Greg, you can give some thoughts on what you saw as well. I know you had some interesting thoughts there. So why don't we start with you, Phil, kind of get your take on the three cons, community con, corporate con, and whatever you call Defcon. I don't think it fits very comfortably into any space. So, and then maybe talk about what you talked about there on your presentations.
Sure. Yes, kind of my view of Black Hat. It's a little more corporate. I mean, it's kind of maybe a little hackerfied RSA, I guess maybe.
I got you. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
So it was interesting. It's my first time to attend. I'm a big fan of DEF CON, and that's usually what I come here for. And for those who haven't been to DEF CON, it's more hacker focused. There's lots of different CTFs, although there is some good involvement with other areas, like they had a Blue Team Village, a Recon Village, and some really great talks there in different villages. The villages is one of my favorite things about DEF CON. There's just so many opportunities to get hands-on experience. Even speaking of APIs, Corey Ball was doing workshops there at in the Red Team Village at DEF CON. So people had an opportunity to that, and he released his training for free. So anyone wants to take
that's awesome.
He posted up on LinkedIn. But B-Sides Las Vegas was interesting because it's more community driven. It's the very first B-Sides conference. It's a little more beginner friendly. If someone's wanting to speak for the first time, that's a good place to speak. And I spoke in the Higher Ground Village, which is hosted by Kathleen Smith. And so she does a lot on trying to help people get in the industry, do a lot of resume reviews and mentoring. And so I gave a talk there on getting experience to become a pen tester, because you can go take all the classes and stuff, but finding the experience that you can put on a resume or help you get through an interview can be a little more difficult. And then at Black Hat, I gave a talk for CyCognito, was a sponsored talk, and the main focus of my talk was external attack surface management. I really show the need for external attack surface management, some of the gaps that we see in the industry, and then did a short demo showing how CyCognito can help with some of those gaps. And at DEF CON in the Adversary Village, I gave a talk there on the kind of the adversary mindset and philosophy.
That's good.
Which was actually one requested by the founder of the village last year. I gave it last year virtually, and this year in person.
Nice. Good stuff. So, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Sounds like a long week, though.
Yes, very long. I'm very tired.
When'd you get there and when'd you leave?
I got there Monday at 6 p.m. and I left there about 6 p.m. yesterday.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Yeah, that's a long week.
I'm normally there just for DEF CON, and 3 days into it, I'm usually done. I didn't know how I was going to get through it, but I did. I guess part of what helped me is being away from people for so long, people you hadn't seen so long.
That's true.
I felt kind of energized and motivated afterwards, and I think that kind of helped get me through there.
You had a ton of pictures with people up there, so, and we saw each other like going through the elevator bank like real fast. So that was really cool. Well, good, man. Thanks for that rundown. Appreciate it. All those should be available online.
I believe so.
Yeah, all that should be. I know there's some. Greg said there's a way to get all the DEFCON and B-side or Black Hat talks.
The main tracks, yeah.
For the main tracks, yeah. But some of that, I know the B-side stuff they usually put all online and everything. So, okay, cool.
Yeah, my DEFCON talk and the talk that I gave at B-Sides, those were done at previous conferences, so they're recorded online too, so they can be found too.
Grab them other places. Okay, cool. Well, Greg, what was your take?
So I was out there for Black Hat and DEF CON. It was different to see. I've done Black Hat, or I've done DEF CON virtually before, and I've been out there for last year, but that was different. This was my first year at Black Hat. It was different to see the kind of corporate nature of it. I expected it. That's part of the reason I wanted to go, was to see kind of what the larger businesses are doing. The parts that I kind of keyed on the most were a lot of topics around throughout the keynotes and different talks were kind of looking back over the last 25 years. What have we figured out, or where are we going to go from here? And while there are many themes that go on, the kind of big one was that it's going to get better. It's probably going to get worse first, but we're going to keep improving. We're still young. We're still trying to figure out what cybersecurity actually means and how do we keep this moving forward. But ultimately, we will do so. The other topics and talks that I listened to and went to were around scaling and automation. How do we take something that is fairly small or intensive, whether it's, reversing or analysis or anything like this. And how do we do things at bigger scales? Because we have to now. It's not enough to find a vulnerability and patch it in an organization. How do we figure out how to patch vulnerabilities for all organizations? And one talk was very interesting on that specific topic of taking a vulnerability found in open source software and pushing out pull requests in bulk. And it was really interesting how that person went through it. And then the other side would be the kind of impact of world events can have unexpected consequences for business. And that kept coming up. There were several talks about the war in Ukraine and how that has affected different things, whether it's organizations making their own choices and sanctions, or it's entire segments of a user group or whatever going offline. Or being impacted because they have a much bigger thing to deal with at the moment. And how does business respond to that? So it was definitely a very good experience across both. It's definitely worth going. I'm very tired.
Yeah. So you got in there, Tuesday?
I did.
And you left?
I left Sunday morning. Well, I tried to leave Sunday morning.
There was like some brouhaha at the Las Vegas airport, right?
Yeah, there was an incident at the airport. So there were a lot of flight challenges getting out of Las Vegas Sunday morning into probably Sunday evening. And it was still unclear what happened, but people rushing security, and then they had to clear the airport and start over with scans. That was not helpful for anybody.
Yeah, that's not fun. Well, I'm glad you made it back. I know we had quite a few people delayed, and Las Vegas having a flooding event for like 2 weeks prior, and then during Defcon was a little weird too. It was weird hearing a bunch of thunder on I think it was Thursday night,
and the flash floods.
Watching the rain come in, and then seeing all the videos of flash floods. They are not built to handle drainage. It's just It doesn't happen there a lot, and they don't build to that. And it shows when that happens. So
it does.
Well, thanks for running through that. I'll say I only went to Black Hat, but I was there Monday to Friday. Came back, got there early Monday morning or mid-morning, and then came back Friday. My take was my world now is staying up in the suite and talking to customers and vendors a lot, and then getting to go onto the floor for all of 30 minutes with Greg, I think, just a little bit, and took a little bit of video footage and stuff. But what I got out of the talks with our customers a lot was specifically around, and this is no surprise to anybody in the industry, around staffing shortages. Everybody's got a skills shortage, but and Set Solutions does staffing. We've got a staffing arm, so we can help our customers with that. But what I found what was interesting was that a lot of them were very open to the idea of doing staff augmentation while they found somebody. That was in the past. I've known a lot of people who's like, no, let me just go find somebody to do this. I want to get somebody here permanently. And our advice, since this is all started, is it somewhat self-serving a little bit? Yeah, but when we've got good people that can do some of this staff augmentation for them, is to fill those roles in the short term with somebody who can get it started, get it operationalized, and then hand it off to somebody. So customers are really much more willing to entertain that, because I think they're kind of being forced into that because they either got somebody and they left. We had several customers that said and we've seen this because we staff, that they've come in for like a week if they're lucky, and then take another job and take off. And sometimes they go and start that day and, I took another job or whatever. So it's just a really crazy environment right now. So we talk about the staff augmentation side of things. The other thing that was really encouraging, and it's starting to line up finally from a technology perspective, is going back to the basics of things like asset management. There's several companies now that can do, and CyCognito kind of works in this space too, a little bit with the asset management stuff, is, you've always done it with CMDBs or whatever, you've done it with typical type tools, but you've never ever had a really good one source of truth. You've got we sat down with one customer and counted all of their different places where they've got, from the EDR to their vulnerability management to their CMDB to their whatever, their patching, we counted up 8 sources of truth. And now we've got companies now that are starting to connect all those sources of truth, deduping them and putting them in one spot. And you can get a really good view of what's in your environment. And you're having to do that with software now too. But because they now see the technology lining up with the need, people are much more willing to tackle asset management. And a lot of them were actually starting to stop other projects or stop other purchases to go back and do a purchase in the asset management space and figure what's just a piece of what, this whole validation and visibility and whatever are going to end up calling this whole space. We talked about it yesterday in our meeting, but those are the 2 big things I took out of it. And to me, that second one is very encouraging, that the technology is finally starting to line up with the need to do something that's very fundamental, that people do so many other things and don't know what they have in the first place to secure it. So that's what I took from it. Let us know what you think about those, and love to have discussions about it. But 3, I think, fairly interesting views with somebody who went to all of the things, somebody who went to most of the things, and somebody that did one of the things, and then getting to see all the different aspects. So, all right. Well, I think we'll jump over to the main segment then, unless y'all have any parting thoughts in there. No? Cricket? All right. Let's go. All right. Your time to shine here, Phil.
Okay.
So main segment. So as we said, Phil works over at CyCognito. It's now called, when I started looking at it, it was attack surface management. Now they're starting to differentiate, which makes sense, external asset attack surface management. We had a meeting internally with you guys yesterday, an enablement meeting that was showing some of the different terms that might come out of that. But essentially, external attack surface management, you're looking at all the assets you can find externally that are exposed to the internet, and some you know of, some you don't know of. What are the flaws? All this, not vulnerability management. I think most people can look it up, kind of figure that out, what it is. But in general, what I wanted to focus on, because I've been looking at this, and you wrote an article, and we're going to provide a link. And I think you did a video you did a presentation somewhere too.
Yeah, actually, API Secure. Alyssa Knight hosted the very first API Security conference back in April, and I was invited to speak there. And that was one of the things I come up with because, it was fresh in my mind working at CyCognito, seeing the things that are exposed externally that you don't know about sometimes, and the danger of those. And also, since API security has become so prevalent now, I think we're probably where cloud security was 3 to 5 years ago. People really didn't know how to do it well, and now they're getting better. And API, I think, has been overlooked because it's hard to detect. Yeah. They think it can be found, and I think some people just don't know how to secure it properly or test for it. Because I remember when I first started pen testing, it's pretty difficult. There weren't that many resources on how to discover APIs. Usually you got Swagger files, the files given to you to perform the pen test. But if you had to just discover on your own, it was kind of hard to figure all that out. And so now there's a lot of good resources for that out there.
They're starting to get more resources. People are building projects. They're building actual production. They're building commercial tools to start detecting these things. But, and this is a discussion we had yesterday when we were kind of debating on what exactly we were going to talk about. But if let's say from a scenario perspective, we're in only a black box test mode. We have no information, and Greg, I know it's not the best test in the world to do. Totally understand that and totally agree. But there are reasons that companies do that sometimes, right? They want you to see, they want to find out what you can find externally. So if they go in and say, I want you to find my APIs, and if you can't find them, then I'm going to consider that a win. Mm-hmm. That's a black box test. That's a security by obscurity type of test. Mm-hmm. I think when we talked about this yesterday, we kind of came to a consensus that for APIs, that could be it's not your only defense, but it could be a pretty decent defense, because APIs are hard to discover if I don't provide you for any information. So can you back that up and is that right? And why are they so hard to find?
Yeah, it's just it's difficult. URLs are usually pretty straightforward, but with APIs, you have to do some kind of word list to look for different types of structures that you're going to see that directory path going to the API, and using some of the discovery tools to find those type of items. So yeah, they're a little bit harder to find. But when you mentioned about the black box thing too, I do agree we need to do white box. But I think it's good to do actually a combination. See if it's able to detect it. See what can happen without credentials or any kind of source code to your for your pen test. See what can happen that way, and then test it as a white box. But using the different discovery tools has helped. And one of the things that really has, I think, helped that space too is bug bounties, because a lot of people in the bug bounty space are really good at recon. I mean, you got Jason Haddock's bug bounty methodology. Whereas when I got some of the inspiration for this talk, because it's a reconnaissance talk, how he was able to discover things combined with Katie Paxton Fear's content on API. She's a really well known in the bug bounty space, and she's got some really good content. So that was kind of the initial inspiration for the talk, because this came to mind whenever I do talk. Sometimes, most of the time, I'll do talks that are not vendor talks that show the need for CyCognito and kind of show the gaps. That way it displays to the customer why they need something that's automated to make that easier and be able to do more with less.
So Greg, when you're doing, and I know you do web pen tests right now for some of our customers, from an API perspective, what do you find the most difficult just at that first stage? Do they ask you to look for them, or is it more they just want to do white box and let you go to town?
We see a pretty healthy mix, I think. Most want us to look at it and kind of defer to how we would like to approach it. It's not regular for us to see specifically a black box or closed box test, in that I think a lot of people understand that that's not giving you a very good test. As a component of a full test, it's awesome. Like, if you're trying to hide, if your API is not meant to be discoverable, if it's not supposed to be used externally, then there are good findings of what we can find from open source, or what are your other applications leaking. Is there connections between what your applications are doing, or the source code for your apps that are using an API that you don't want hidden, in which case you need to do some obscuring there. So we do have people that are looking for those findings. We have others who are more concerned with how can we abuse their API. And that's really where I tend to spend a lot of time. Is APIs are challenging because somewhere, somehow, they're either credentialed and authenticated, which means there's potential for weaknesses there of, are those credentials, or if you're using tokens, are they being handled correctly? Is the front side leaking the method for how those credentials could be compromised? Or in some scenarios, are they leaking the password? Because it has to be somewhere, so we keep looking. But the coverage does get challenging if there's hidden methods, or if parameters for a test or how the API works are hidden in the kind of underside. We have to kind of defer back to the development teams of, just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. We're going to try different methods. We're going to try different word lists or inferring information from what we can find. But if you've just hidden something, sometimes we may not see it. But to Phil's point, the bug bounty and other security researchers who are not quite as time boxed will probably find things eventually, and probably more consistently. They're not bound by the same period that a pen test is.
I mean, that's a great point, because if you're doing, the closed box or cleared box, I mean, the differences are very stark, and you're not saying, well, it's time and materials, or it's this SOW is this amount of time, and this is the only amount of time. Because I mean, I have seen in the past where somebody's done a very closed box type of test, and they've said, you've got to get to this specific place within this specific time, or I'm declaring victory. And it was very much a political thing inside. They could go to the board and go, hey, I did these things. Whereas somebody else, they're not going to declare victory when they get popped, because somebody's sitting there working on it for days and weeks at a time, because they don't have anything else to do, right? That's their whole goal in life. So I think that's what it comes down to, why we're kind of talking about security by obscurity, that it's something that can help, especially with APIs, but you've got this weirdness with not weirdness, but this whole thing with APIs is that typically, if it's a B2C type of API, you want people to be able to have access to it and use it in some way. Where if it's a B2B, maybe you can obscure that. You don't want the public to see it. So that's where it becomes. So what you've got to do is you got to challenge then is you would like have to tell a developer, I want you to secure or code this obscure in an obscure way. And that, that puts them in all kinds of weird situations where they're like, well, I would traditionally use a /API/ whatever as my path. And now I can't do that. So it throws a lot of weird stuff in the mix. And it's why I think we were talking yesterday is just, shouldn't be the way you try to secure it. There's plenty of other things, whether it's pen testing it through a clear box type of test, or if you're using other tools or a combination thereof to try to secure this thing down. Don't depend on obscurity over the long haul to be your main way of securing this. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree. And also too, it does help because if, even if it is secure, it's kind of nice if it's not easy to find for the threat actors, because that gives them a little less time, or maybe they don't run across it. But yeah, I agree.
Maybe they would jump to the next one.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really where I've always seen security by obscurity. It's like, I've hit this, I can't find it quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Just way back in the day, I had an old mail server that it was an Exchange. I was running my own little business, contract business, and I found this one that was free, actually, probably had all kinds of flaws in it, but I would sit there and watch the logs as people would hit it, and they were trying to hit all these Exchange paths. Mm-hmm. And they would get frustrated, and I watched them like script kiddie sitting there throwing scripts at it over and over and over, and they couldn't find anything. So finally, all of a sudden, they called in dad or something, because they were like looking for actual paths and trying to find stuff. And it actually, in that point, then worked. Security by obscurity. I didn't mean to do it. Yeah. I was just putting this tool out there just so I could start getting emails way before the cloud days and everything else. But yeah, eventually they did. They found their way into some paths and found some stuff, and were able to, I shut it down before that. But I mean, that's essentially what it comes down to, is that they had time to do it. I saw this happen over like 2-week time frame, whereas generally somebody would do that for a couple of days. I can't get in. Oh, I've declared victory, so everything's good. So,
and it's also being aware of anything that's leaking. Maybe you've got APIs that are only needed externally, and of course you don't want those exposed if they're not needed externally. Just like other, just like some different risky protocols that you'd have exposed, you want to make sure those are not exposed.
That's a lot easier to do some of these days, where you can have direct connects, or and back in the days we'd have a T1 between the two companies or something like that, where you could exchange info over, so it would be never exposed. But even internal APIs, I mean, that's the whole concept, where you don't want to trust anything. I'm not going to say the buzzword, Greg, don't worry, but you don't want to trust anything, so you still need to code it to a point where and secure it to where you're not, even with that private connection in there, you want to make sure it's not vulnerable in some way. So
yeah, because you always have the insider threats to worry about.
You absolutely do. There's so many things to worry about. So many things.
There's a lot of things, and the attacks vectors come from everywhere, and we have to think about that. So APIs, at least from some perspective, aren't a whole lot different than a web application. The methods are different, but at the end, it's a piece of logic that's exposed to the internet, or exposed to the network. Defense in depth still works. It will continue to work. It's not one silver bullet. So the best APIs I have seen use lots of methods to deter attackers or to make attacks more complicated, whether it's short-lived tokens that the application knows how to rebuild itself, but they're not kind of deliberately exposed of how do I generate a token or things like this. They use WAFs to guard against the common things of if we're trying to shove things into paths, or if we're sending malicious payloads, that it's just kicking those things right off the network. And then skill development of the developers, of having the developers engaged on what security means, of why is it interesting when an error gives me a call stack, or when I throw a single quote into the search to make something happen. The fact that I got an error is a problem all by itself.
Yep.
What else I can do from there is different, but that there are a lot of findings that I send back that are, you're giving me more information as an attacker that you don't need to. Like, you can lock this stuff down, close off your banners and everything else that I have no information to start from, and it will encourage attackers to move along. The bots are still out there. They're still scraping. The bots get smarter and faster every single day. But staying below everybody else that's popping the attention of those bots or the other attackers that are out there will keep things working for a while. Just needs to be backed up with more.
Yep. Well, I mean, you talked about Jason Haddix. I worked with him at Fortify for a while, and I remember testing APIs there and how manual of a process it was. And then now you've got all of these tools that are, and then, I mean, bots were around then. Bots have been around a while, but they weren't, like you said, Greg, near as sophisticated, 6 years ago. Now they're just able to unleash them and just keep doing a lot of the things. I mean, we love automation and orchestration internally here at Set Solutions, but it's got a good side and a bad side, like everything else. What I'd love to see, and I've had some of these discussions with some of the API security vendors, is something that can do more of a discovery, not just depending on word lists, that kind of stuff, and not depending on a swear. I just don't know, honestly, if that's possible. I mean, they just act differently than web applications, and can be behind so many different things now that you're not going to be able to discover them that easy. And there's companies that are trying to do that that are API companies that are doing something akin to attack surface management, but focusing on APIs, but they can't do all the things that you guys can do when they're just focused on APIs. So it's an interesting problem. We'll see what happens in the next 5 years.
Yeah, we actually do some API discovery and testing, and it's kind of on the roadmap to enhance those features.
Yeah, and it's a hard problem to solve.
Yes,
it really is.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
Yeah,
you got to figure if it's hard to do manually, it's going to be hard to automate.
Well, and that's why a lot of the API vendors now focus, which is well and good. I mean, I talked to all of them just about, they focus on the internal discovery and knowledge. They are, connect, they call them rogue APIs, which is fine, but that's only from an internal perspective, where they do taps or, whatever they do, sidecar installations to discover that stuff internally. But none of them, except one that I've seen, has started to attack it from the outside to really find it. And then what they've depended on is what you're talking about, is attack surface management tools to do that connection on the outside. So it's good to see that there's starting to be some focus on discovering those APIs as well. So, well, any parting thoughts, Phil, on this?
No, just thanks for having me as a guest. It was an honor to join you, and especially live.
Glad you're here. Very good to see you last week. Good to see.
Yeah,
I mean, like, we hadn't seen each other for we saw each other at QSecCon last year.
Yeah.
But with COVID and everything, now I've seen you twice in 2 weeks.
We used to run each other
weird. Yeah. Conferences. Now here we are. We're getting back into that swing. So I was really glad to see you. Glad to see all of the pictures. And if you don't know who Phil is, go learn who Phil is. We've had another podcast a few months back where he gave some more of his history. Lauren wants us to just have him on and do nothing but talk about his wrestling career. So maybe we'll do that one. Lauren would love it. She wants to talk about the bear. Mm-hmm. So, all right. Well, thank you, Phil. Appreciate it. You. Greg, parting thoughts, words, wisdom?
Mostly I just want to say thanks to Phil for everything that you've done so far. The evangelism and the kind of bringing people along and showing what this is and what to expect from it has been great. So thank you personally for that. And that's really all I have.
Those are great parting words. Absolutely. Thank you. You've done a lot. Don't mean to underscore that, or do mean to underscore that. I mean, you've done a lot for the community, and it's genuine and it shows. So we appreciate that. So
it's an honor.
Thank you. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate you being on. Hopefully you can be in the studio sometime. We are still working, by the way, on the new studio. We've got things are moving there. So hopefully by episode 50, maybe we will have a new studio and you can take a look at the cool new digs we're going to have. So, all right, everybody. Well, thanks again for joining us on episode 47. Let us know what you think. We'll have all the relevant links and everything in the in the show notes. And we'll see you hopefully in a couple of weeks on episode 48. Talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.